You're now live.
Okay, we're now live and we're going to continue our discussion now that everyone's had a few hours to not think about broadband. To talk about what we want to do with broadband. And at the extreme is we could give it all to the present commercial carriers and just tell them to run it out. They have the staff, the know-how, and everything else. Or we could do nothing, kick it down the road, say we've given the PUCs enough to build out this fall and deal with it next year, once we know what the infrastructure bill is. And it looks like there's going to be significant money for broadband in the infrastructure bill. So, or anything in the middle of those two extremes. I don't expect any one of those will fly, but
you mentioned that you had looked at some NCSL material regarding the infrastructure bill. Were there any educated guesses as to when?
No, this was just, Biden has made it clear that broadband is infrastructure. And there was some number with billions, but they didn't say when. I think the best guesstimate I've heard is maybe October.
Right.
It'll get voted out.
Mm-hmm.
So not for this construction season. Anyway, where I'd like to start with is, what are our goals? What do we want to achieve with this bill? And go from there. Senator Bray.
Well, I was going to chip in. So when we had the federal delegation visiting 2 weeks ago, they said the House would probably pass this American Jobs Plan, the so-called infrastructure bill, in July. And there's the August recess. The Senate would get it when they came back September, and he didn't think they would have it until October. So that's why I've been hearing October.
It's not this construction season.
Right, not anything more official than that. The other thing we talked about, just in terms of shades of gray between the two poles you laid out, was might we, without casting aspersions, define criteria for awarding contracts to companies that seem, I don't know what to say, preferable to this committee. I think part of what we heard yesterday suggested that all private telephone companies are not the same. And I don't know how we would legally and appropriately ever distinguish between them. But
that's another question. I've got all kinds of notes, but first, I think, what's our goal? I mean, is it, because there's a good part of the House bill that seems to be focused on shoring up and having a CUD in every corner of the state. And is that what we want to do? And
it's not a goal, it's a strategy.
Yeah. So
Agreed.
What's our goal? And then you go through, how do you get to your goals?
I think our goal is universal high-speed broadband.
Okay.
Connect, and that's universal connectivity. And I go beyond broadband to cellular as well.
Okay. So that's our next. So it's
That's me.
universal.
The rest of the committee may have different views.
And may I ask the perennial question? When we say broadband, we mean?
I mean, right now, 100, but that's going to be a moving target. And for me, I want 100. We said as a standard, we said 100 by 2024. I think one of the things we will do as we talk is decide, is that the right year? And is that feasible, given what we know? The second thing is, do we mean 100 right now, or do we mean 100 at the end of the pipeline? And are we doing now things that will get us to that?
Well,
or that won't.
I don't
impede-
have 100 in downtown Montpelier.
I'm pleased that is a useful place to start, that if that's our goal is 100, then we can, as opposed, I believe that the original draft of Senator Brock's bill was a 25-3 or something. No, that
No,
was the
what I
House bill.
said
That was
in
the
that
House
is
bill.
I said
Forgive me, forgive me.
25-3 now, but a pathway to 100.
Yep.
That it
Okay.
had to include
Our
that.
goal should be 100, and then if
Okay,
we,
okay.
then we would go to the question that the chair just mentioned. How do we deal with places that are on different levels today? How would we start, or what would our tactic be? Yep.
Right, okay, so we've got universal connectivity. The first question is, are we going to focus on broadband like the House did, or are we going, the original VTA was really focused on wireless phone connectivity more than broadband. Are we going to do broadband? Are we going to do wireless, or are we going to do both?
Just, Madam Chair,
Well, I got
Does-
two more people ahead of you,
that was-
Senator, that raised their hands.
your question was for Senator Brock on does 100 in what he just recommended necessary or cover the ability to do wireless if you've got 100.
That wasn't my question, because I don't even know what you said.
Senator Brock does.
I don't think hardwired fiber gives you wireless connection.
You're correct.
Thank you.
So
Can I get to Senator Pearson?
go ahead.
Okay,
Yes,
I
Madam
got a
Chair.
question on the table, which is, do we want to take on wireless or continue with wireless? And that'll get us into E911 in areas we've been working in. Or do we want to focus on broadband? So Senator Pearson, I've had you, and then I saw Senator Bray.
I think we should just focus on broadband in this bill and in this moment. And I'm happy to justify that if you want, but we kind of heard that a robust broadband infrastructure probably makes wireless easier down the road. And I think, it's inconvenient when you drop a call, but it is essential to business and modern life to have internet in homes. So that's where I'm coming down on that.
Was it Chris Campbell? Somebody told us to avoid that cell phones were particularly difficult to do. I
We
think
also
we
have
found,
that FirstNet thing, just
Yeah.
a lot. But, not to dismiss the 911 problem. That
No.
is a real problem. I just don't think we should try to address it in this bill.
I think before we go home, we do need to deal with the deficit at 911. That seems to be an ongoing thing. Okay, it's Senator Bray, and then I have Senator McDonald.
So I would second Senator Pearson's focus on broadband. It's a challenging enough issue in and of itself without the complexities of layering in mobile, which is kind of similar, but really different, actually different. And also a super competitive, fast changing world where we have less influence than on broadband. So not to ignore it, but just to keep the eye on the prize, kind of a thing. The other concern I have is sometimes when we talk speed, and then we'll switch to talking about, well, we want fiber to the premises. And my take on this, that I wouldn't count on me, but someone, the department, I suppose, should reaffirm this. If we only talk about 100, and that was a hard fixed stop. I mean, I think we want technology installed that will evolve. will last for the long haul. And so sometimes people talk about it, they say, oh, to get 100, you have to have fiber. But I think there are other technologies that can get there. But I'm just hopeful that rather than getting stuck on a particular speed, 100, what we did 7 years ago seemed very forward looking. Now it's kind of maybe, it's still great, but it's maybe middle of the road or slow in 10 years. So my substitute for the particular name of a particular technology would be something we invest in that will still be durable and upgradable. And that's, I think Leslie talked about this yesterday. You can upgrade the optronics on either end of fiber, and it becomes sort of infinite speed. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
So I've got 2 for focusing on broadband. Senator Hardy, do you have a position on this?
Yeah, wait, I agree with Senator Pearson. What are you putting up the yes thing? Can everybody else see that or just me?
Well, no,
I'm
I have put a
experimenting.
yes up. What? Oh,
Pearson did.
Pearson's doing it.
Oh, and it went away.
It went
I'm just
away.
wondering, it could be a good straw poll tool. It's in reactions.
Yeah, I agree with what Chris Pearson
Okay,
and
I'm doing the
Chris's. I agree
old-fashioned
with the
thing. I'm
Chris's.
making marks on a piece of paper.
Yeah, I'm
Senator
taking
McDonald.
notes too.
Oh, and now I just put one up for Ruth, but it showed up on my square. Sorry.
Senator McDonald. So we know
Madam-
what kind of a symbol to put up on you.
I'm frightened to ask. The Senator Pearson is correct to focus on broadband, because if you do broadband, it is the gateway to all the other concerns. And if you pick something that is less robust, you are cutting off future possibilities. I think the term that's been used is future-proof is what we're trying to build out, networks that are future-proof. And then we would turn to how to subsidize and promote the connections to that. And then we would discuss how to subsidize monthly bills, or whether that was appropriate to get people on and get them started. But without a robust, future-proof broadband backbone, we are cutting off all the rest of we're limiting the rest of our goals.
Okay. I've got 4 out of 7 so far. Senator Brock, would you like to?
Sure. I tend toward the broader view that, to me, this is about telecommunications, not solely about broadband. And among the things that it's really about is separating the department from its regulatory role and its advocacy role, which I think is important. And technologies as they exist right now, when we talk about future-proof, technologies are emerging and they are intertwined in themselves. They don't exist as separate animals. For example, I'm home here in Swanton, and if I get a phone call on my cell phone, I get it through my internet connection. That's where it's powered. It's not coming from
Yeah, I
Verizon
do
directly.
too.
It's coming through my internet. And as people, particularly in rural areas, use cell phones more, they will be able to, in effect, have that single number, which they don't have right now. These technologies are combining. And I understand what Senator Pearson and others are saying about the need to focus. And we heard that from some people yesterday, but I think that a smart enough telecommunications authority can focus, can place its emphasis where it needs to as it moves forward, but without kind of putting this other technology off on the shelf that somebody else in a non-integrated way is managing. And that's my concern, is that we're fragmenting telecommunications when we separate it. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Okay.
Senator Pearson.
So in downtown Burlington, when you call my cell phone, it goes through my Wi-Fi, because the towers right in my neighborhood, for whatever reason, are not that strong. And it was a godsend when AT&T enabled the Wi-Fi calling. but that actually is the argument for broadband, because that's broadband. Now the coordination. So it's an interesting question, Sarah Brock, and I'm, you said if we should be smart enough to do both. We don't have a great track record of multitasking as a state government, but the department is going to continue to be responsible for both. The question to me is, what's the dollar? Where are we investing energy and dollars? And right now, I see the need is in the broadband sphere that will, as you've just pointed out, enable cell coverage. That isn't to say it should halt. If we wanted to give some money to the department to make sure cell coverage remained a priority, I'd be open to that. But we have a big hole in the broadband that I don't feel like we have in the same way with the cell question. Anyway, just some thoughts.
So, Madam Chair,
Senator Sorokin.
I think I agree with the singular focus with the ability to at least charge somebody to continue to not totally disregard cell as it affects broadband. But it seems like we've put 10 times as much energy and effort and testimony into broadband than we have talking about cell service. And I also believe in the Willie Sutton school of thought, go where the money is. And I'm not sure how easy it is to spend this once in a lifetime ARPA money in areas other than broadband at this point. And I shudder to think the amount of additional testimony we would have to take if we broaden the scope at this point. So that's where I am.
We have VTEL coming in next week because they've contacted Senator Brock and asked to come in. So I'm sure they will have a perspective on this. But we did do a lot of work with the ARA funds on cell service, and it is a lot better than it was. It's not good, and yes, there are rural roads, but my cell phone works off my Wi-Fi in the house. The minute I hit my driveway, it's working off my wireless cell service. And everything's coming into my house through my cable provider at 25.3. So I can't tell where one ends and the other begins. It's a little slower downloading books in the car if I'm outside. Senator Bray.
Yeah, you mentioned VTEL is coming in next week. I'm wondering if we've asked them to come in prepared to talk about prior investments and the number of addresses served, that kind of thing.
Senator Brock, is that all right with you?
Absolutely fine with me.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
Faith, you
because
got that?
we've tried this, and so it'd be good to see what the results were.
Yeah. And I think it's during this time, and this was a federal grant, the allegations were the speeds were not what was promised. The technology didn't work as it was supposed to work, but it was a huge federal grant, and Vermont had therefore gotten its share, and we couldn't get any more money from rural broadband or telecom. So it tied us up from getting money since probably since 2008 or 10. So I think that's part of the concern now, that going forward, that other than just saying we're going to have 100, I know the commissioner this year on the grants, the money was not, I guess we allowed some money to go out up front, but the remainder of the money did not go out until the installations had been checked and made sure that they were delivering the speeds that they got the contract because they said they were going to deliver those speeds. So if all you were delivering was 25.3 and you said you'd do 100. And as far as I know, we didn't have any problems, but there was a back check on that one.
But what of this issue, and we're getting into speed as opposed to just what is it we're trying to do. But as we talk about speed, I think we have to recognize that there is not a universal or even near universal capability to get to 100 throughout the state right now, and there probably won't be for a considerable period of time. And so you get to that question also of, if you have a pathway to get there, that's one thing, which is what I tried to emphasize in my bill. But I was also mindful of the people who have basically nothing now. And so the question would be, do you want to have 25.3 if you could get it quickly, or do you want to wait 5, 6, or 7 years to get 100?
And we punted on that one before.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
I
a
mean, it's a
hard
judgment
one.
call.
Yeah, it is, So Senator Pearson,
Well, that is a painful question. And we have always, I don't take this the wrong way, but fallen for it in that we continue to allow public dollars to go to a patchwork kind of technology. And people talk about 100 or 50-50. People talk about a gigabyte service. The fiber that comes to my home delivers me about 150 symmetrical, but it could deliver me a gigabyte. And so when we talk about future proofing, we really are talking about fiber, and we have monkeyed around with the numbers as opposed to talking about the technology. Fiber operates at the speed of light. That's why people like it, and that's why they say it's future proof. Copper is the speed of sound. I don't understand cable, but it's somewhere in between. But the speed of light has not been broken, right? As our fastest understanding,
Yeah.
short of in some basement in Switzerland. But to me, Madam Chair, what I've been trying to, because it's a lot, and I appreciate you asking for the goal. And I don't think we're there, but we're fumbling around and
we're getting there.
I do see just parts of our bill here. There's a governance part where Senator Brock and the House bill are quite apart. I myself don't have a clue where I land on that question. There's an accountability part, and let's not spend too much time with Vitel on that question, but it would be tempting, right? And shame on us if we don't learn our lesson. The accountability has been wrapped into the CUDs.
Right.
How do we hold them accountable? Well, they're accountable by nature of their structure, but as somebody said yesterday, so they'd fail and someone gets off a public board. That's not exactly real accountability for dollars. Then the CUDs also, I think, need technical expertise. We understand they're brand new. They are already, Madam Chair, I would submit, everywhere. We have accomplished that on paper.
Yes.
Every region is covered.
We got a color on almost every square in the map.
Right. That's right. And that's all it's worth.
Right.
But that is phase one. And we did that. That's the last 2 years of some of our work. So to me, Senator McDonald and I have been talking about this, the growing pains and the lessons learned of EC fiber. We want to make sure that those lessons are learned, and we don't have 9 years for the new CUDs to learn it. So that suggests to me thinking about answering that question. How do we do, I'm not wed to all the money going to CUDs. I don't think that's a goal. I'm wed to getting money out the door to build broadband as fast as possible in certain principles that, frankly, the CUDs answer. But I don't have a slightest hesitation to giving it to Franklin Telecom or some of these other reputable actors. But those are
Like
some
to
questions.
clone Franklin Telecom.
Yeah, that was my question. I think I asked her,
Yeah.
why aren't you growing? Please.
Yeah.
So the question, especially in the short term, you've asked this question about the timing. I think we ought to make money available for people that can use it to build this summer. And that's not most of them, unfortunately.
Mhm.
So the rest should be some money around, basically we've heard it supposed that, well, what happens if those CUDs are so immature, don't write good contracts, don't sign good contracts. Well, shame on us if they don't sign good contracts. We ought to help them figure that out. And we can't legislate that, but presumably we could give Department of Public Service or somebody 2 good lawyers. That's cheap compared to the investment we're trying to make. So to me, I want to see us like short-term invest in the next year in order to really jam it out next summer, invest some right now to get what can be, poles and wires this summer, and sort of maybe the thinking of like immediate term and infrastructure investment kind of, and I don't mean infrastructure, I mean like brain capital, engineering, help them do that. Your telecom CV fiber, they're waiting on an RFP on who can design their system.
Right.
We want
I
that
think
to be
they're the one that's closest
Yeah.
to building. And if they can build, then, but what I'm hearing, I think, is perhaps the strategy this year is to do what we can to build this summer. And that might involve existing carriers. It would probably involve the small telecoms because they've got the crews and the know-how. They know what streets they need to run their stuff up. And we got to give Franklin enough to do that last 9 miles with 2 people on it, and then hope those people want to sign up. But
We've used this word strategy a lot. And
Yeah.
that is a word that we don't have a lot of. That's something that we've been missing. And that's strategy and planning. And I know that moves us into another subject matter, but it's definitely relevant to what we're doing and who's doing it. And does it make sense about what's being done? And what are the resources necessary to do it? Having this planning, our 10-year telecommunications plan that we haven't had one for I don't know how many years, is integral to that and how that gets done. So I just want to put that also in the background, that we sitting here around this table talking about broadband expansion policy, none of us are expert in this area. We may know in general what needs to be done, but having the capability of developing that right strategy and then executing it is what's critical.
it is. And unfortunately, we also have a whole lot of money, which we are probably not going to see again. And we've got 3 years to spend it.
Sure. And so we've got to do some things right now. And we may make some mistakes in doing them, but you're right. We absolutely cannot afford to wait. And that notion of not missing this summer, or that we can recognize there's some things that need to be done. And we've got some people who I think want to and are willing to do it. And I absolutely say, let's go ahead. And yes, we know that the strategy is going to be fleshed out, but just recognize that we do need that strategy and plan as part of it.
We do. And I don't know if the people that are doing our planning, if they're at a point where they could come in and just give us some general concepts that they're looking at. And I think we could ask Commissioner Tierney, if that's possible, just so we have an idea what they're thinking, which could help.
I don't know if you
inform
noticed
our-
the governor's ask, in terms of what he's put in for planning, there's a lot of money in there for planning, if I've read that correctly. Much more than, we're getting the discount plan here.
So, yeah, so I wonder what he's thinking of planning. Is he thinking of the CUDs or,
It's unclear.
yeah,
It
it's not
hasn't-
clear. So we know we need a plan, and then we need a strategy to achieve the plan. And we have some money to do that, which is rare. Probably too much money. Senator McDonald.
Madam Chair, our goal is to get the broadband future-proof everywhere. The next one is strategy, and that would be where would we like to get it first? And where would we allow?
That's
what
not
is-
strategy. That's
Yes, it is.
a sub-plan.
Yeah, well, they go in a hierarchical order. Goal, strategy, tactics.
Small a,
And-
small b.
And if my first question would be, what did we not do last fall because we believed we couldn't do it as a first step to building out broadband? And that was the pole harvesting and
Harvesting.
having the information to get the builders to build. And we didn't do that because we thought Lighthouse there wouldn't be time and it wouldn't be
Said it wouldn't
approved.
qualify.
So I would suggest that wherever we have, even though we haven't gotten our strategy where we would seek to have built first, we would put immediately to some of the pole harvesting work and find out whether the co-ops need that or don't, or are ready to go and to begin to hang the product on their wires. That would be our first kind of inventory on achieving our strategy, but we don't have a strategy. Where do we want to put our money? To the places that are unserved and underserved? Is that where it goes?
Well, I think what you're seeing is Consolidated is putting its money into rewiring Montpelier and whoever is doing, Barry, because the customer base is going to demand it. I'm going to be pretty annoyed if you get better service than I do, Senator, because you're
Well,
out
no
in the
more
booth.
annoyed that the people who don't have no service now would
I
be-
understand
if you
that.
get
I'm
upgraded.
saying
So-
is it is in their business interest to make
So-
me happy because I'm paying their bill. So they're going to
Okay.
do that.
Yes. So if they're gonna
Okay.
do that,
So we
Where do
don't
we
have to do
spend-
that.
where do we spend our money? Yesterday, they didn't seem to be interested in taking it off. Well, where do we spend our money? And that my choice would be to get the broadband to the places that are underserved or unserved, and to start there if we have the horses to get it out there.
Okay, I think that's in both the House and all the things. So we're going to focus on the unserved and underserved. And I believe underserved was in the House bill listed as 25.3.
Well, some places are more underserved.
Than
Than others,
others,
Madam Chair. Yep.
yes. Okay,
So-
and is our goal to get the wire by the house or the fiber? Whatever that
Yes.
stuff is, by the house, or is it to get people actually connected to it?
Separate goal, Madam Chair. We have 3 challenges. One is to have it go by the house under the principle of build it and they will come.
Uh-huh.
And if they don't, then we have connection issues to connect people to that what's going by the house. But if it's not by the
Okay.
house, it's not a
So our
discussion.
goal is to get fiber by all the residences and then to ensure that anyone that wants to can hook up. Meaning that we're going to take on some discussion of some form of subsidy.
I think, Madam, you've made that clear that we have to discuss how to get people hooked up. And we have to, we've been urged to consider how to get poorer people or folks that are sick or have kids in school hooked up with a subsidy. But those are moot issues if it doesn't go
Right,
by the house.
Right, but they are part of our goals, which
They-
means that
yes.
when we're looking at the money, we have to look at. And if we're gonna take back the connectivity fund and give it to E911, we've got because that federal program is just a database. I don't, Maria, do you know, is the, yeah, the subsidy for phone Lifeline. I remember when we got off that because it wasn't adequate and we were trying to make it so if you qualified for any state subsidy program, you qualify, you know, like for Foursquares, or that you would qualify for Lifeline. And I think Lifeline may now include broadband, but I think that may be some testimony we need.
So, well, I think you're right, that Vermont did expand and I think got a waiver to expand eligibility for the Lifeline program. A few years ago, the FCC modernized the Lifeline program, tried to streamline things, created a national verifier registry. But the upshot of all of that is the Vermont waivers were repealed. And now, to be eligible for a Lifeline, you are either income eligible, and I think it's you are at or below 135% of the federal poverty level, or you're categorically eligible. You participate in one of several programs, and the one with the lowest income standard, I think, is the Three Squares program, which is, I believe, 185% of the federal poverty level, which was also what the Vermont waiver was. So, and yes, you are correct that Lifeline can be used for broadband. It was expanded beyond just telephone. And in fact, the standalone telephone federal subsidy is being, if it's not already, it's being phased out. But there is a Vermont subsidy, which you created when this whole modernization process happened, to pay for just voice service for those Vermonters. It's like $4.25. So probably a little more information than what you wanted, but
Okay,
I think we need to know what that subsidy is, because I think it's very small.
the federal subsidy is $9.25, and it goes to the provider.
That's not going to pay a monthly bill. For
What, so, but okay, there are just a couple of other things to keep in mind. There's also, it hasn't rolled out yet, but I know you're all familiar with the pandemic emergency subsidy, correct? And that's going to be $50 a month. And I believe it's like 3.2 billion for the whole program. Eligible households will have up to $50 per month. But it's temporary. It's going to last until the money runs out, or I think up to 6 months after the state of emergency ends. So there's that money, which is not quite available yet. I think maybe by the end of this month, they'll start accepting applications for households. And there's also some money for devices, $100 for each household to purchase to go towards a connected device. So that is,
To what, Madam Chair?
no,
sorry?
but we're seeding the Senator, this is just a discussion of federal programs.
yeah,
Okay.
just, and so it's a subsidy. The
That's what
$50 a
Ron
month is for service. It goes to the provider, and the $100 discount is for device, for consumers to purchase a device. So they have to also pay a certain amount of money out of their own pocket, a minimum amount. So
Okay. But $100 doesn't go a whole lot if you're trying to buy a computer. Some schools have given their kids MacBooks and others haven't. So Okay, but if nothing else, we're going to have to deal, because the worst case is we're going to spend $100,000 or 200 to run that 9 miles of fiber and nobody signs up, or they sign up for 6 months and then the subsidy goes away and we've got a bridge to nowhere, at least until wealthier people buy the house. Which is not what you really want to see. So Senator Pearson.
Madam Chair, I just want to correct something. You said some schools are buying their students MacBooks. I think it's Chromebooks, and I point that out because there's a big price difference.
Okay.
I would hate anyone listening to think that the kids are walking around with MacBooks, publicly funded MacBooks.
They are Chromebooks.
This challenge of fiber and kind of, do we need it? People don't want it. They get fiber, but they're still buying the slow. It's a very logical. We've all heard it, and it really does make sense until we start thinking about the potential. And there's no real way that I can figure out to measure the business that has to have fiber that might go there and will definitely not go there if we don't do it. That we did hear about when the pandemic was raging, people who couldn't work at home because they were architects or whatever. And I don't know how we deal with that, but it's at least as valid as this notion that a lot of people might get covered by fiber and not really need it. That is true today. But we also heard that in regions that have nothing, it's basically the same cost to string. If you're stringing something fresh, it's effectively the same cost. So I just have to point this out, this potential. That's really, to me, the interesting thing, because when we think about what does our economy look like in 10 years in our rural state, it is going to have to, if it has any business development, it's going to have to deal with fiber. It's going to have to deal with strong, expandable broadband, and that means fiber.
Okay. So primarily, we want to get the fiber out there. Secondarily, we want to make sure that the people that need it can sign up to it. And right now you've got telemedicine, and then there is, because we were up here discussing telemedicine, my husband was trying to have a telemedicine meet with his doctor at UVM during, the first few weeks of, I think it took half the technical staff at UVM to help him get, because I wasn't available and he just keeps pushing buttons. So we are going to need to help folks figure out how to get on, how to get the voice in and the picture in. And I think Holly Grosvenor has probably the best handle on that. I don't think the for-profit guys, they've got profit and they're offering the lower rates, and we can probably require that. But for the CUDs that are working in much smaller bases to get, where 50% of your people are low income, that's probably not going to be viable. We can look at it, but it's going to be a lot harder to do if your profit margin to keep all your rates lower is, minuscule. It's going to be harder for them. And I think we want them to have a healthy enough profit margin so they can survive when the federal money goes away. So Senator Bray.
So this is, I was been thinking about a question you had probably 35 minutes ago, and that is still chewing over, which was, what are we doing like this summer and fall in order to make progress? And so we heard, it sounded to me, Consolidated said they already have their $140 million plan, ready, set, go. That doesn't seem like they need really anything from us other than they're saying they might get to the 30% they're not planning on serving, but I'm not sure that they get there any sooner by virtue of that. They might just get to the 70% they're planning on serving sooner. So it makes me think about those telcos, the smaller telcos we heard from yesterday, and which I think everyone left with a favorable impression. The only thing I don't really know, and maybe there's no answer to this, is if we give them money, can they go any faster than they're already planning on going anyway? In the case of Franklin, it sounded like yes, it was money was the rate limiting reagent. And I think it sounded like more money could lead to more work done at Waitsfield Champlain Valley Telecom. But, it's one of those things. I'm happy to, I would love us to be helping get money to people who are ready to do more work, but are short of the money. It reminds me of that VEPSI but-for condition, which I don't want to get into. It's like, forget it. We would be talking about that and then another winter would come. So the last little bit on this is, where do we put the money that they can draw it down? And what's the process for them to draw it down? Do they have to apply? And what are the criteria?
Yeah, we're gonna, and the House bill has 3 programs. We'll look at those and see if we want to limit it to 3 programs or we want to just leave it open. How do we set up a structure that can quickly get things out? I didn't see anywhere where, I guess somebody got paid in this the same as a judge, but without a budget for any kind of a ruling authority, it's going to be difficult to get the expertise that we're going to need to get things out the door. We need, the CUDs need expertise in financing. They need legal assistance in putting things together. It sounds like they need engineering. And then yesterday, the ugly head of Make Ready was seen. And we did a bunch of work on Make Ready maybe 2-3 years ago. I don't know if that made any difference. So I think one of the things we'll hear next week is what is happening with Make Ready? How do we speed that up? Because if it takes 6 months to get, and we heard that, Consolidated had cut people out of their Make Ready office in order, they're probably making ready their own polls.
We would ask June, wouldn't we ask her how to change the statute of the law to make that, speed that up? That's where I would go.
We thought we did that 3 years ago,
Yeah.
so I think
So
we
we
should find
have to do
out
it
if it
again.
worked.
Yeah, we have to do it again. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
A rule came through Elcar like a year and a bit ago, and it was on Make Ready, and it was Irv Tomei was there. It was in theory, it solved the problem. Who knows in the real world what happened.
yeah, I think we should check on that. And the other thing that came up last November was the Batman car that was going to drive around and read all the polls. And that's the last, we were told we couldn't use CARES money for that. But if we can't use ARPA, we can probably use, the next bulk. But I haven't heard any more about the car. And I think that was CV Fiber and EC Fiber.
Ask
together.
FX about that.
Okay, so let's have FX come in and talk to us about the Batmobile and if that's still available and how,
Well,
if that's the best way to do it. And does that get you around? I don't think it gets you around the make ready, because once you know what's there, then you gotta get the wires moved or the new poles put up. So that would be good. Senator Sirotkin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm not 100% convinced that we are ready to move to a new authority, given all the money that's available to us and the need to get money out the door quickly. I think we need to do that at some point. I don't know that it has to be July 1st. It could be January 1st. I remember the commissioner coming in last year. We were all excited. I don't know where she was thinking she was going to get the money from, but she laid on the table a plan that if she had something like, oddly, $225 million, she could do the entire state. Lo and behold, we're getting $225 million. Close enough. And she had some sort of plan. I don't know how much detail she had, but there's a part of me that feels like we shouldn't fully give up on the idea of some sort of hybrid or some sort of work that we mandate that the department do immediately to get money out the door while we're building or refining the plan to set up this separate authority, which might take some time, the hiring process, their meeting schedule, all of that. That's going to slow down getting money out the door and getting fiber strong that people have in the last hour have said is so important. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there of, hearing from the department what they would do right now with this money. I know we want to move the authority, we want to consolidate, have this separate structure, whatever it is, whether it's H-136 or S-188 or 360 or 188. I think there's a need for that eventually. I just don't know that the timing is as right. Something has changed since the House passed H-360, and that's $225 million being put in front of us.
And more coming, it looks like.
More coming too.
Okay, so I've got Senator Hardy and then Senator Pearson.
Sorry. Thanks, Madam Chair. A couple of things, and I'm close to when I have to go get my shot. Senator Sirotkin, I think H-360 does exactly what you're saying, which is there's a delay between when the VCBA or whatever it's called starts. I think it starts January 1st, and the department does the interim 6 months of giving out money and managing the programs. And then there's a transition to the new authority. And I guess sort of along those lines, it seems to me like we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Our friends over in the House did a lot of work to get their bill going. Senator Brock did a lot of work on his bill. And I have a list of what everybody said, of course, in terms of your priorities. And it seems to me that we could start with H-360. There are some things in Senator Brock's bill that I think make sense to move over into it in terms of the language about the small telcos and things like that. And then the accountability measures, I think, are really important and need to be worked on. And then the subsidy and access things that you've talked about, Madam Chair, in particular. And I agree with Senator Pearson. Again, I need to stop saying that, Chris, but the sort of like the fiber is the key, not the argument about the speeds. No offense, Senator McDonald, but
No argument there.
Okay. So anyway, I guess my larger point is let's not reinvent the wheel. We actually have a pretty good bill to start with, and let's start like changing that in the way that we want to put our stamp on it. Yeah.
That's
Thank
what we will do
Well, that's-
eventually.
That's what we're talking
mix
about doing. So where do we build out?
Okay, we've already decided that to the underserved and unserved.
Okay,
That's the first priority, okay?
excellent.
I've
I
got that
can't
in my
imagine I let
notes.
that slip by without writing it down. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's excellent.
Okay, because I think we can agree that Burlington Telecom is going to take care of Burlington and Comcast or whoever's here is going to take care of Montpelier. I just wish they get their cable thing off the end of my street so it's not one lane coming in and out.
It's got to be symmetrical.
That's right. So,
Well, regardless of what we do, as far as the CUDs and all the rest of that, building up the capability to be able to manage, to be able to plan, to be able to do contracts, to do the things that they need to do in order to accelerate stuff, that's got to be done. It's got to be started now. I know that there would be an interim period, and in either bill, there's an interim that is projected to have to occur in which the department remains in charge. But the thing that I think we absolutely need to keep in mind is the department needs to do something as immediately as they can to bolster the resources in the department to be able to do those things, because the department can't do it. And I think we have to recognize that in terms of doing things like planning, the department has been a failure. You know,
don't
we
have the
haven't
staff.
had a
think that's
statewide
true, Senator
telecommunications
Brock.
plan that's been adopted in 17 years. And it doesn't give me comfort to know that the same staff that couldn't do it before are still the staff that we're going to have in the interim unless we bolster it. And so I think we do need to look at the strategy, even short term, of doing that, because otherwise they're not going to be
Yeah.
successful.
she's only got 3 staff, but what we've
I have to go
done,
get my shot,
Good
guys.
luck.
Solve this problem. Have a good weekend.
Thanks.
you too, hope your arm doesn't hurt. Yeah, the department's only got 3 staff, and what the plan they've been writing has been focused on the amount of money they've been taking in with the connectivity fund. I mean, it hasn't been on what would it take. Now, they work for the governor, and no governor wants to have his staff saying, you need to put $100 million into this, because that sets him up to be hollered at. So perhaps we need to make the legislature responsible for outsourcing that plan. It may well, because there's so much money, it may be, I've yet to see a state official come in and say, we don't support the governor's budget. I mean, that's a mantra.
Well, the one that I'm waiting for is the official to come in and say, we've got too many staff and much too much money, and we'd like you to thin it down.
Yeah,
But
we don't hear
either.
that either.
But
But we
you're,
have-
you're right that we do need to do something, because there's a plan out there. And one of the things I think the committee should take a look at is the RFP that's out right now, governing the plan that's being produced, so that you have a better understanding of what it is you're likely to get out of this. Because I know I'm pretty underwhelmed.
It occurs to me when Senator Brock was talking about getting a 17-year, once every 17 years, the telecom plan. It's like, it's the only other thing that operates on a 17-year cycle I know of is cicadas or locusts, right? So
Do they eat fiber? Are we gonna have a problem?
Hopefully they eat copper. Madam Chair,
Oh,
I just want to say, I need to be convinced that we need a whole new entity. I think the entity that as I understand, Senator Brock, you have 5 sort of board members and a few.
I'm not locked into the board size at all. It
No,
could be smaller, believe me.
I understand, but conceptually, there's 8 people anyway involved.
and all kinds of
The key
committees.
thing in my mind is there's a broadband czar.
No,
That's
I
what's
know.
important, who's in charge and not a hireling.
My point is, if we gave the department 8 people, they would actually have a department. And I I'm not against it, but I feel like I don't want to overemphasize that it's some panacea. I think, we've under-resourced the very people we're frustrated for not doing it.
Yep.
We're
Great.
contemplating a new structure appointed by largely the same person that's appointed the current structure that we're frustrated with. It's just tricky, I think. And so anyway, I just want to be on record that I need to be convinced a new entity is needed at this point.
Okay.
I'm not convinced it would be terrible. I wouldn't want to celebrate it as the answer.
No. Well, I think both have been trying to put some separation between regulation and promotion because there's a conflict there. But again, this is one-time money.
But doesn't
Put
it
8
just-
people in, they're there for 3 years, whenever the money runs out. That's not, there is going to have to be some ongoing oversight. I'm looking at the governmental structures that have been proposed. I'm wondering if they aren't going to cost more than stringing the fiber. And that's concerning because I think to get the quality you want, you're going to have to pay a decent salary.
You are.
And
why do we say that the department is a regulator? I don't understand that.
I guess they're supposed to make sure that to regulate, they represent the public before the PUC. So if
They're the public advocate.
they're the public advocate, so if they've promoted a company to put out a service and then there's a complaint about the service, they're kind of
Okay.
caught in the, did they mess up? You
Right
know,
where we are.
yeah.
Well, they have regulatory authority, don't they? They can, they
We're going to
don't,
put them in charge of EB5 as well.
no, I think they do. Don't they have powers to impose fines and stuff like that?
Yeah,
So
Yeah, they
they're
do in
out-
some areas, yeah.
They can petition the PUC, I thought.
right.
Do
Well, so
that.
that's different. That's very different. They can,
Well, no, but if they're the primary group that petitions the PUC, then a concern would be that they're regulating the industry that they're also in some ways promoting.
Promoting. Yeah.
Giving money to
Yep.
millions of
Yeah.
dollars.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the appearance of impropriety is at least there. Senator Bray, or the potential.
Well, so we struggle with this. Are you a regulator? Are you a promoter? Agency of Ag is probably the one where we hear it the most. There's another, just thinking aloud with the committee, there is, ACCD, which is an unabashed promoter of development and stuff. So you might say, well, a group that was looking at the state in terms of delivering this service might be better housed in a department that is out there to develop infrastructure on behalf of business and communities. I don't know. And to the end that it's still government, which to me, it seems legitimate. I'm remembering why the biggest reason I recall about getting rid of ETA was that the governor said, if I'm in charge of achieving broadband for the state of Vermont, let me get my hands in the controls, take it back from VTA, put it into mainline government. So that seems pretty legitimate. If it's an expectation that government's supposed to do the role, you want to get away from regulating and then you could go to another department. It's not as though I don't think we'd be stepping on many toes because the small staff at DPS, could transition to the other. I don't know that there's merit to that or not, but I'm just trying to throw out ideas for making progress sooner rather than later.
And again, we're dealing with one-time money. And that I mean, if we were just gonna say, okay, the state's flush, we are going to hire 8 people, that's 8 pensions. We could do that, but the fact is, in 3 or 4 years, we're back to the alligator jaw where our expenses are exceeding our income every year, and it'll just widen that.
Madam Chair,
I'm hanging around Senator Kitchell too often. I'm even worse in health and welfare.
Can I say one quick last thing on that? And that is, I think it's gonna, we might say the money's here for 3 years or in a big pile. But the need, I think, is,
The
as far as
need
the
is
eye
gonna go
can
on.
see. Yeah.
And maybe we focus on a czar.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the Nulties yesterday touted loans. And
Yeah.
the reason they touted loans was because if you're going to take out a loan, you got to convince the lender that what you're doing makes sense and is within the regulations.
Will you tell that cardinal to be quiet?
I don't know how, and when you take out loans, you bring some accountability and order, and there's a screening process of someone who makes sure that they're not loaning money wastefully. Our dilemma is going to be, how do we take some of this money? How would we be permitted to take some of this money to help set up, some sort of revolving loan funds that would then enable the CUDs to go to borrow money for the rest? And I think you asked the Nulties that question, and they said they would get back to you on with writing on if there were any ways to do that, because that would both bring some accountability, and money would only get loaned to the people that could make good cases and show their engineering, et cetera, et cetera. In whichever way we go, we're going to have to begin to find out who's ready to build, whether it's the the co-ops, Vermont and WEC, and maybe some of the munis who can authorize tomorrow to go up on their poles and start hanging stuff, whereas other utilities who've been very persnickety about make-ready work and have dragged their feet, sometimes for lack of labor, and sometimes because the longer they drag their feet would give them an opportunity to get the fiber up first. So
but I think the common interpretation at this point is that ARPA funds can't be used for loans.
yes, and you're correct. And last we took the common interpretation last time and found out, well, we could have done a few things that we chose not to do.
Right. But if if they hadn't changed the rules at the last minute, we would have had a whole lot of money clawed back. So
we might have.
knows?
It didn't seem to be a problem for Michelle Vitae, who had kept money for goodness knows how long. So we need to get an
Talk to
answer.
him.
We need to get an answer on. We got to do some. We have to answer those questions because they will open up which tactics we can employ. And I'm going to call the Nulties and say, the sooner you suggest something, the sooner we'll be able to follow up on it or reject it, because that seems to be a roadblock here.
I mean, I had thought about, why don't we just capitalize a fund and invest it? But I'm pretty sure that wouldn't be allowed either. I've thought that on a couple of things. We've got this huge amount of money and we're going to rush to spend it because there's a time frame on it, which means we might not spend it wisely. And there was this one, and there was one other place that a lot of money was coming in, probably not in this committee. And I'm saying, well, why don't we just capitalize it?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't,
Senator
well,
Brock
I
might.
have a feeling it wouldn't be allowed
better
because
ideas
it
than I
won't be
do.
spent in 3 years. But that's, 3 years is better than 9 months, but it's still in the terms of the job that needs to be done,
So,
a very short time frame.
I wondered,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I'm going to need the weekend, but I'm not going
I
to get
think
a
we
lot
all
of.
do, Madam Chair.
Yeah, but
took
I'm
your-
starting to think maybe our focus should be setting up, doing what we can to get as much as we can out the door this building season, and then investing the bulk of our effort and hopefully not the bulk of our funds into figuring out how we develop the infrastructure to get the rest of it out long term, and assume that some of the infrastructure money will be there going forward. But I'm also pretty sure that Vermont could use all of that infrastructure money just on roads, bridges, and potholes. So that's not going to be a given that we get that either. So Senator Brock, I'm chasing a moth. I hate moths.
The only thing that I would add is I know we have to do some things right now. I know that we've got to get the momentum going. I know that we can't afford to lose a construction season, but we also can't afford to ensure that we have a strategy and a plan. Because otherwise, we're going to come back here next year to begin arguing the same subjects all over again, and then debate for the better part of a session to figure out what we do to put a structure in place. And that's too long a period of time. 4 years will go by like lightning, particularly when you've got to, plan for what you're going to do. You got to get materials, you got to get crews, you got to do all the things that you need to do. So to me, we really need to accelerate this. We can't have a summer study to agonize over this for months, and then come back and agonize over it for more months when we're back here in January. Now,
So
maybe there's a way to do it. Maybe, we do some work over the summer. Maybe we do, maybe we hire consultants to do some stuff for it. Maybe we start right now just by reviewing the plan, because right now, my concern is we don't have a plan. We don't have a plan. We don't have a strategy. Those are, to me, are the fundamental things that you have to make all of this successful.
And you come up with the tactics.
Okay,
Absolutely.
well, all your
That's just something
homework
for the weekend.
assignment is to go home and think about what a plan and strategies would look like. I am starting to have visions of grad school where it was flow lines where things got put on cards. And I can remember being in Molly Lambert's kitchen, laying these cards out. This happens to here, then this happens next, then that happens next. Flow charts. I'm sure the computer is much more efficient, but that's really where we're lacking. How do we start visualizing this? Okay, this is where we want to go, and then work backwards. How do we, go from everybody's got cable and start figuring out the branches we need to deal with, or sitting here with $125 million and going forward. But where's
Today was the start.
Senator Hardy? Senator Hardy
Right.
likes flow charts like I do, graphs. Senator Bray.
So, I appreciate that Senator Brock keeps coming back to a plan, and if I said, okay, so what kind of plan are we going to ask for? Some of it seems to me like and I hate to sound super fundamental, but really, it seems like we're struggling with what's the role of government in all this work? Like, are we nudging? We supplying money to others? We're letting them do it on their own? It's not very clear to me how we've decided what role we've assigned to ourselves in all this so far. Like, the biggest thing I can see is we created CUDs because we saw that the private world wasn't getting there as soon as we would like. And now I don't know what role we've envisioned for ourselves. Like, we're not willing to own it. And we're nudging now. But anyway, so I'm just thinking about, it seems a little hard to have a plan if you don't know what role you conceive of yourself government having for the long haul, or even for the next 5 years.
Long
Well,
weekend.
we have a department. We have set up a basic, government has accepted the responsibility of getting money, minimal as it is, and getting the lines out to the underserved areas. And we've pretty much let the easy areas go to the for-profits. That's what we've been doing. We now have more money than we ever dreamed of, which means our structure is understaffed. We have set up CUDs before we had all this money. And so they're there, many of them in infancy. And I think we're really talking about how do we help them grow up quickly? And what kind of a structure do we need at the state level to continue to manage? Because the money's come to us, so we're going to be held responsible and we're going to own it. Good, bad, or indifferent, we'll own it the most if it's bad. If it's good, everybody else will take credit. But if it goes wrong, the buck stops here. So that's life. Senator Brock.
I would say that we need to develop a strategy to ensure the development and propagation of statewide broadband and cellular infrastructure by a date certain, in accordance with the policies that we already have embodied in statute. And ours is the development of the strategy, and to ensure that there are entities that exist that can execute it. That, to me, is government's responsibility. Now, once we go to that next step of saying, well, who can execute it? Then you got to outline that strategy of here's what we've got to do. Here's where we have to do it. Here's what it is we have to do. We've already said, that we want 100, we want it to be ubiquitous. We want it to be, a number of other things that we already have in our governing statute. It's a strategy of how we get there. We have to articulate it. And that, I think, will drive, how much responsibility falls on government or elsewhere. I think it's going to fall on government because nobody else has the capability to oversee it,
Right.
to see that it gets done and to see where it isn't getting done, to be able to provide the resources to get it done.
Yeah.
And we got to do it quickly.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay. Give us all good things to think about. We're going to continue this discussion next week. Let's see. We'll have the department and EC Fiber or other folks come in and talk to us about both pole harvesting and make-ready issues.
Sent you, by the way, a document today to everybody on the committee that I got from a person who shall remain nameless. And a lot of times I dismiss some things and don't agree with other things. I thought this is something that all of us should read perhaps twice, because I
Okay,
think it's interesting. And it's also, I think, something that we should think about for next week in terms of our agenda.
okay, sounds good. So committee, have a good weekend. And I will see everybody on Tuesday.
Bye.
I enjoyed
Goodbye.
this conversation.
Faith, are you,